Bina will be taking over, and she is a designer for many years, but more than that, she's recently rediscovered herself as a novelist, and her first book has been made into a Bollywood film. So that's Bina for you. But apart from that, in the past, she has done many covers of Goa-related books. So she's all over the place. So there are two aspects to Bina. So Bina will put you in touch with the panel, and then
Not with the panel.
she'll introduce, and then Tino will moderate the
We'll
discussion.
follow what we've discussed.
Yeah, carry on.
So, good evening, folks. I'm Bina Nayak, and I have the honor of introducing the man of the moment, writer Mario Coelho. So, I've known Mario for...
Very close.
What is that?
This mic.
Closer.
This much? Okay, great. Should I start again?
Yeah.
No. So I've known Mario for a little over a decade. We were introduced by a common friend, the artist Clarice Vaz, and he was introduced to me as a poet and a songwriter. Much later, I learned that he's also a children's author, and he has acted in many plays by the Mustard Seed Company. And Isabel is here right now, who runs the Mustard Seed Company. So here are some of the illustrious achievements that Mario has to his credit in short story writing. His story, The Legend of Captain Barbossa, appeared in the HarperCollins flipped anthology of ghost and adventure stories in 2019. And I'm lucky to have read this before it got published by HarperCollins. His first book, comprising 10 short stories of murder and intrigue set in Goa, Moonlight and Shadow, Unsettling Tales, was published in 2024. The Twisted Child, Tales of the Unexpected, is his second book, and we are here today for the launch of this book. Future projects include a book of suspense stories titled Tales of a Darker Night, and a collection of 25 of the famous Vikram and Betal stories, tentatively titled Betal Pachisi, written almost entirely in verse. It will be published by HarperCollins, and it will be launched in April or May this year. So this is a very good year for Mario. He's going to have back-to-back launches. Thank you. Thank you very much. On this panel today to talk about Mario Coelho and his book, The Twisted Child, are some of the best short story writers assembled all under one roof. So it's like Avengers assembled today. So I'm not one of them. I'm a novelist. So I guess brevity doesn't come easily to me. And because brevity is such an important part of short story writing, I find that most short story writers are also good poets, as demonstrated by the panelists here today. Tino, Jose, Sheela, and Mario, of course, are all excellent poets too. But I'm here today as a fan of Mario Coelho's short fiction. And I'll just take 5 more minutes to tell you why I love his stories. So like most people, I love watching scary movies. What I find most fascinating is the way Mario creates a feeling of anxiety and dread in the reader with none of the tools available to a movie director. For instance, tools like eerie music, different POVs and unusual camera angles, jump scares created via editing. Mario does all this with words, with his vivid descriptions that bring the whole atmosphere alive for the reader. I get completely involved in the story I'm reading and find myself breaking the fourth wall in reverse and conversing with the characters. So just picture this. I'm sitting quietly and reading a story silently. And then suddenly I start shouting or saying, in a public place usually, "Hey, don't go there. Hey, come back, turn. When I was younger and when movies were much cheaper for a family of 4 to see, my sister and I would be damn embarrassed to go to the movies with my mom because she had this habit of giving running commentary when any action scene was happening in a film. So I've seen like Star Wars and Return of the Jedi with my mom saying things like, what is this? Why are they fighting with tube lights? Futli wala churo zatlo. So reading Mario's stories have made me realize that I've finally become my mom. So thank you, Mario, and over to Tino.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now tell me, are you all okay with the panel being here, or do you want us to request these gentlemen and we change places with them? Are you all okay? Should we? It will help? Then can we request you to come here, please, and can we move there? Okay. Mario and Lourenco. You can sit there, Bina. Okay. So, is this a little better? Okay. And for people at the back, you all can hear us all the same? Okay. Anyway.
You want to move your chair?
Okay.
Would you like all the panel members to stand up and perform?
What members?
Panel members.
Oh,
We can stand
okay.
up.
Anyway, now you see, the short story is often treated like the middle child of literature. And all of those of you who have been middle children will perhaps realize what this means. It is shorter than the novel, longer than a poem, and it is constantly being told, constantly being asked when it is going to grow up. Now, the short story often takes a long time to write. But just because it's described as short, some people imagine it's easy. The panelists we have here, the distinguished panelists we have here, will testify to the fact that a short story often takes as much hard work, as much obsession, and as much silent grief to write as a short story, as a novel. The panelists we have are people who have voluntarily chosen to compress, condense whole worlds, whole lives, often moral dilemmas into just a few thousand words. In the next half an hour, we'll be talking about how short stories actually work, how they begin, how they end, how they can begin, the several ways in which they can begin, the several ways in which they can end, what to include, what to exclude, how long should they be, how under pressure are choices made about not only length but also voice. You speak in the first person, you speak in the third person, mood, slice of life, various things. Now we hope all this will come about from what our three panelists here will tell us. Sheela Jaywant is a panelist. Her stories have won prizes both nationally and internationally. Sheela is a very widely anthologized writer, appearing in many anthologies. She is a translator from Marathi into English. And you know, translation can make or break a novel. Booker prizes, Nobel prizes have gone to translated novels. And that is half the skill is that of the translator. And so now these awards are given both, if they are not in English, they go both to the writer and the translator. Sheela is a major translator, and more than anything, what strikes me, because I find that the most difficult to do, she's also a humor writer. I mean, her column, she's written large number of columns, and most of them are extremely humorous. Now, Sheela will be speaking to you, and Sheela said that when when asked what she thought of Mario's books, she said, Mario Bab's Twisted Child reminds me that imagination and creativity is great to read, but it takes a lot of the grey cells, a lot out of the grey cells. Sheela, when you address us, you will address us and tell us whatever you want to say about the short story. But I would like you to also address this one little issue about humor. How do you, because I think it's difficult, how do you weave humor into your pieces? Do you write your piece, then add the funny parts? Or do you think of certain funny things and then build your piece around it? Or do you just write like that? If you can address that for the benefit of people here, apart from whatever else you want to say. Sorry. José Lourenco. He steadfastly refused to send an introduction, though he was requested 2 or 3 times. But I'm a great fan of José's writing. José is a civil engineer, and I've been a fan of his ever since I chanced upon his blog. And it is an amazing collection. I think recently you haven't been updating it, but it is an amazing collection, and I advise all of you to go and check that out on blogger.com. It is an amazing collection of short stories in English and in Konkani, poems, articles, reviews, and various other things, art, and we have a shared interest in architecture too. In fact, José writes in his interests, it is, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it is reading with a W, so it's reading, writhing, and architecture. And he says, and other such wretched things. Now, I'm sure that when he speaks to you, it'll, he won't be doing any writhing, whether some of us will or not, let's see. But José, when you address us, I think if you can answer to us also, among other things, how do your short stories usually begin for you? And when I'm saying how they begin, I don't mean on a page. I mean how they begin in your mind. How does an idea, when it begins in your mind, how do you decide whether you want to write a short story, whether you want to write a poem, and if you want to write a story, will you write it in English or will you write it in Konkani, because you write in both languages? So if you can open that out a little bit for our audience. Mario is our third panelist, the bridegroom of the day, already introduced so well by Bina, so I will not say a second introduction. But Mario, when you speak to us, if you can tell us, because you write the tales of the unexpected, not horror stories, scary stories. You tell us about that too. So Mario, can you tell us, do you usually know the ending when you start writing? Have there been stories where even knowing an ending, you have changed the ending? Do you begin writing your stories backwards? And do you think that even a well-written short story can fail if the last paragraph is not well written? Okay? So, now I've posed some questions, but I leave it to the panelists now to freely enlighten you about what they feel and what they want. Sheela?
Good evening to everyone. Thank you for making the time to come here for the release of Mario's book. Mario Bab, congratulations.
Thank you.
I will answer Tino's questions. He asked me something about humor. So I started writing a humor column by chance in 1983 for a paper called News Time, which was published by the Inadu Group. And alongside was a gentleman called Rajendra Puri, who started writing then for India Today. I went into oblivion because of domestic duties, etc. Then I picked up humor writing again here. I wrote it for 20 years, a weekly column for 2 different newspapers. Now, how do I write it? I don't know. I think you have to be born with some crackpot genes, because I can see humor at a funeral. I can, I can laugh through an air crash or whatever it might be. I don't actually do ha-ha-ha laughing. But something strikes me as, you have to be a little bit detached maybe. I cannot really tell you what that humor thing is. But language plays a huge role. And how do I improve that? By reading. I've found no substitute for reading. I tell this to people who are students or at workshops that I have done, that if you want to produce good music, you need to listen to others. Bad, good, mediocre, whatever. But without reading, you can't improve funny vocabulary. Reading is the only exercise for that. How do I write what inspires? I don't know what the word means really, but what triggers off, what used to trigger off a column was, or still does, is it could be a sentence somebody has said, like somebody said that, things never change. So as things have been, things remain. Got converted into a story. Sometimes it could be a traffic jam where I used to eat lunch. I don't eat out, not very much. So I carry my little tiffin wherever I go. If I have to go to a government office, to a department, wherever I go, I have my little flask and my tiffin. Airlines, international flights, anywhere, my dabba goes with me. And I've seen the reactions of other people. I'm not a Gujarati, I'm not a Sindhi who's supposed to eat khakras and poha wherever they go. But so the reactions of other people often trigger off short stories and humor, I feel. Does it cover?
Yeah, you've covered the question.
Yeah.
Great.
About his book now or later?
Yeah, whatever you want to say. You're welcome.
Okay, so I do want to say.
Just
Means what happens? Okay, I'm holding two mics now. Okay, so what I really liked about, you can't hear? You can hear now.
I'll hold one for you.
Yes.
Classify yourself as a political humorist, an observer of life.
No, we'll keep questions later.
Okay.
So
Okay, we'll take some questions after all the panelists have said a few things. Yeah. Okay, made their initial remarks. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll certainly take that question up.
So Mario's book was intriguing because of the title itself, The Twisted Child. And since I worked in a hospital, I actually imagined it could be somebody with some kind of a deformity or, I didn't think that anyone could make a story out of that. But what I really liked were the little verses that he has put in, which are very well written. Verses like these collected could make a book for themselves. For example, this could be I work in a school, for children who we warn against abuse. I like this one. Shimmy and spiral, but don't turn your back on that despicable swarm. Twist and gyrate, then turn and attack, holler and kick up a storm. So apart from this story, I could use this verse anywhere. Come down again, they've only been slowed. Descend from your dizzying height. There's a chapel in front by the side of the road, 3 miles ahead to your right. A chapel need not be something that is religious. It could be any safe place for a child who is in trouble. Similarly, dance little children, swivel and spin, whip through the darkening sky, whirl in a circle to save your skin. Dance if you don't want to die. I somehow related that to real life instances. He didn't really mean that, I know. But this was my favorite story, Shadow of the Vampire. And I'm sure they'll talk more about the other stories. Handing over.
Thank you, Sheela. We'll give this to José Lourenco now. Will you hold this closer to him?
I feel like a politician with all the news, stations. So, regarding the origin of my stories, I think I've been through the same kind of arc that Mario has been through. We have been studying in a highly Western-oriented education in our generation. I think now students, my children had stories by Goan, essays and stories by Goan authors in their textbooks. But by and large, we didn't have much of that. We had mostly English, British authors and American authors. So when I tried to write stories, they would come out like Enid Blyton stories with, strawberries and muffins and mushrooms and everything British. And obviously that's not our culture here. We don't have muffins and strawberries and many of those things here. Or a constable, Goan. Remember Goan? Yeah, the 5 find-outers and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
So for some time I just gave up. I said, this is not working. I can't write stories. I can't write fiction. And then I met Damodar Mauzo, and I borrowed from his library, from his house in Majorda, 2 anthologies of Konkani stories. 20 plus 20, there were 40 stories. And I read all of them, and I just enjoyed them. I mean, I took some time to read Konkani because it was in the Devanagari script, but I had studied Hindi, so it was not really a big deal. And then I found that incidents in my life, around me, in my locality, from what conversations I had with people, there were so many stories. And because they were speaking in Konkani, I began to write in Konkani. So, for example, Zemanuel, one of my stories about an old woman who lives in a dilapidated house with her dog. It was an actual incident that occurred when I went with one of my friends to Sioli to visit his great aunt. And I came back, and verbatim, I just wrote down that entire episode over 2 days or 3 visits. I gave a twist at the end, and that was one of my first stories. Another story came from just a news item in the papers, something about a siren going off in an industrial estate, and an old couple refusing to leave their house, afraid that the government was going to take over their house. And that story became Bapo Kale's house. So that's a news item. Another story came up because I'm a civil engineer, and a client came to me and said, I called one of the Vastu Shastra fellows to my house, and he says, where I'm doing my puja, that puja room, there the toilet should be. And where my toilet presently is, the Vastu Shastra guy is saying that there the puja room should be. So he was asking me how much it would cost to break both these things and build them that way. And God of the place, Jaywant Dev, that story came from that little incident. So it's conversations, it's little news items that appear here and there, it's visits to people, events that actually take place in your life, and dreams. One of my most favorite stories, Zor, Fever, is written down almost entirely 90% as occurred in a dream. Fortunately, I wrote it down quickly as I woke up. So I think stories emerge like that. That's the way my stories have emerged. Yes, stories have to be brief and short. And over the last 5 years, since COVID struck, I have, I think, achieved the ultimate, because my stories are so short that the total word count is 0. I have not written a single short story for the last 5 years. Well, we have to accept that sometimes there will be a kind of hiatus. Martin Scorsese, the famous film director, I don't know how many of you are on Instagram. Yeah, many of us, yes. Anjali, I know you are on Instagram. So I saw a reel where he said, where a young filmmaker was receiving an award, and she said, when I was studying in film school, I heard a saying that the best creativity is personal. What you personally experience, what you personally feel. And then her colleague, Korean director, says that was a quote from Martin Scorsese, and he's sitting right there, and the whole audience gives him a standing ovation for that. The personal. I also feel that every story has to have emotion, has an emotion or more than one emotion. I try to think of, could we possibly write a story about some maths problem, purely, some maths or some technical problem about a plumber doing his plumbing work with no emotion? It's not possible. Because somewhere personification will take place. The maths problem or the pipe becomes a person, and conflict arises. Conflict resolution takes place. So there is always emotion. And then I sat and thought, Zemanuel, Bapokale's house, fever, what are the various emotions? Fear, anger, love, greed, jealousy. If you think of any short story that you have read, there will be at least 1 or 2 emotions very strongly expressed. So I think that is the defining thing about stories. To talk about Mario's book very briefly, I'm very proud of this particular book of Mario's. I know he has published a lot, as Bina told us, for 4 reasons. I mean, I would strongly recommend everyone to buy multiple copies for these 4 reasons. One, we all know Mario. When you talk to him, he's bubbling all over the place and he's animated and he's always, he was also an actor in Mustard Seed Art Company. Isabel, where's Isabel? There she is. Okay, yeah. So I remember Mario from a performance on the stage at Color Academy at the Mustard Seed Art Company. And even in our interactions at Goa Writers and all that, he's always bubbling and talking and animated, and I can see that Mario in these stories. So if you want to enjoy Mario as a person, as a speaker, as a storyteller, and as a funny guy that who really brings joy into our lives, read those stories. So that's one reason to... He's there in every one of those stories, he's there. The second important reason is that, we have these iconic stories that have been ghost stories or frightening, scary stories that have been passed on to us from our grandparents. A man is walking past a cemetery at night, and he sees a skull by the side, and he gives it a kick, and the skull goes flying. The next night, when he's passing through the cemetery, he hears someone walking behind him. He tries to walk faster, but that spirit walks faster and all that kind of thing. And finally, the next morning, he goes and puts that skull back in place, and the spirit ghost stops haunting him. So like this, our grandparents, our parents have told us a lot of these scary stories. Mario has done this enviable achievement of bringing many of these tropes together, these stories together. The connection between nudity, Nagadazawa, and the supernatural. The connection between horror that people feel in their everyday lives, like a girl being chased by an abuser. That is horror. And Mario has not flinched from talking about that or bringing that into his stories. He's talked about vampires and in everyday connections. Coming back to that arc of that I was mentioning, I was once a very strong critic of Mario. I used to tell Mario, why are you writing in that Western tradition? Why all these poems and verses of yours are in that sing-song, Tennyson, or whatever kind of way? We are Goans, man. Write about Goa. We've got so many stories to tell in our villages. And Mario would say, yeah, I should. No? And then he would churn out another of those verses in his fancy style. So at Goa Writers, I remember, I think Isabel, you all remember, I used to attack him all the time and, go after him. And now you have this anthology collection of stories which are deeply rooted in the Goan psyche. He has gone and he has met people. He has asked them, what are your ghost stories? Tell me. He has fictionalized them and brought them all to life in this. So this is ethnographer's achievement. It's an achievement of ethnography. Number 2. Number 3 is that there's a Frederick sitting there, and this is another of those additions of that valuable heritage of Goa. Of course, Mario has gone through that, being a horror writer or the writer of the supernatural. But this is an important contribution to Goa 1556's collection of Goan heritage. We are a small community. Frederick is always saying, we are a what? Small market? What do you keep saying? We are a small market. There's no market, man. We can only print 500 copies, that kind of thing. Frederick is always saying. So this is another contribution to that massive library of Goa in our 1,000-year-old culture, right? And the fourth thing is that I think we should just celebrate as a community our books and buy as many copies and support each other, because that's what they do all over the world. Small communities supporting each other.
Thank you, Jose. Isabel, I see perhaps out of habit has moved backstage.
Yeah.
Funny that Jose should mention among his stories Abu Kale's house, which is one of my favorites.
Mine also.
And he mentioned Mario's Naked or Dead, which I think in this collection of Mario stories, at least from the point of view of craft and writing, is one of the finest. At least it struck me. The language of that, the way it flowed, struck me a lot. Now, Mario, we're all waiting to hear from you.
Once we go to Mario,
Then we'll have questions.
no, it'll go to the launch and the questions.
Yes, no, we'll have the questions, then we'll have the launch.
You are a short story writer.
Yeah. I want you to speak.
Times of India. So you tell us a little bit.
Nothing, we'll do that in the questions.
3 minutes.
Clifford, we'll do that in the questions. If anyone wants to know anything in particular, we'll talk.
Actually, Tino's trying to wriggle out of this.
I think this mic, that mic is on? Is got? Great.
Why do we have 2 mics here?
That's a recorder.
This is the
That's a
recorder.
recorder. That shows my mastery over technology. Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and Bina, thank you for your introduction. I'm overwhelmed by the response that I've got this evening. People have given up their time and energy. Thank you very much. It's very encouraging. You know, by the way, Jose's book is also on sale here. I've got 2 of his. It's called The Fever and Other Stories. So don't not buy a copy of my book, but please pick up copies of his books as well. They are very good. All right. So I started writing for children. I see myself primarily as a children's writer, writer of children's stories. 2 reasons or 3. One, I love children. I'm extremely fond of children and babies. I believe that I believe the book of Genesis says, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I think there must be a revised book of Genesis somewhere wherein God actually said, "Let there be babies," and there was light. Yeah, and then he said, "Let there be butter," and there was more light. I'm very fond of butter as well. Yeah. So that's my personal theory. But
more butter, no more babies.
yeah. So Jose spoke about conflict and emotion. I started writing for children, but in all my children's stories, in every story of mine, there has to be a great deal of conflict. Because I think a story without conflict is like a kind of a dead duck. If there's no conflict, it's not exciting. You don't want to read it. If there's a movie which is very nice and very sweet and there has to be conflict. We are human beings and there is a lot of conflict among us. There's conflict even among friends who've known each other for years sometimes. There's definitely conflict between husband and wife or partners. So, what's a story without conflict? So, I believe that conflict is the central theme of all my stories. Children's stories, stories for adults, crime stories, and supernatural stories. I don't call them horror tales because if it's horror, it keeps you up at night. My stories will not keep you up at night, but there is a dash of the supernatural. If I'm speaking too much, tell me to shut up.
Not at all, no.
Okay. Yeah, so, I started writing stuff like Daksh the Dancing Dragon. So that's a guy who's a dragon who, instead of being fierce and violent and aggressive, is a friendly guy. So Daksh is also in a way modeled after me. Like my wife and daughter, they kind of don't like to come with me, wherever we go out. Because they say, you go up to total strangers and you start talking. And then you see a woman who's expecting and you say, "Oh, madam, congratulations, when are you due?" Which nobody does. And it's not politically correct. And then I'll go up to people and say, "Madam, what a lovely pair of earrings you have," and stuff. They say, "You can't do that today." And they're right, But I draw inspiration from the people that I meet. Okay? I believe that along with conflict, character is important. So the people in my stories are very important to me. So even Daksh the Dancing Dragon is a character. And in a way he is modeled after me. So I just did one story, Daksh the Dancing Dragon, and I thought that was it. And then you had part 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. That's because the conflict started from part 2. You had an army of Komodo dragons attacking Daksha's dragons, and he had to fight back. He realized that being friendly was not enough, and being a nice guy was not enough. There are times that you have to stand and fight. And this is what I believe. It's like that recent Shimbel agitation, place where I stay. If you don't fight, you get crushed. So all my stories are conflict. And the characters, I hope you can see them, you can feel their emotions, and I think I love writing. Okay, so I think that's about it.
Great. Mario told us about how he goes up to strange women who are expecting and asks them when they are due. Something worse happened to me. I didn't go up to a strange woman, but a lady whom I knew, and asked her when she was due, and she said, "What? I'm not even expecting." I don't blame her for ignoring me for the next 2 years. Now, let's open this out to questions. And you can ask any of the panelists or me or whatever you like, whatever questions you want to, about the craft of writing, about the art of writing, about anything you like, because this was supposed to be that session. We will begin with the question from here, which you had asked. And would you like to take one of the mics and ask so that people can hear the question? And then we can respond in whatever way.
We take this.
Okay.
Just a name.
Yeah. Mention your name and ask the and say to whom the question is directed.
I'm Philip de Cruz. I'm from Sunnydale. Frederick invited me here. Now, I'm very keen on humor, and I admire people who can find humor in life and put it down. I'm absolutely useless at it. And on the other hand, you get people who work for television channels like Saturday Night Live, who are paid to write skits and things that are humorous. How do you make this leap? Now, obviously, you said you have to have something within you, but do you have to observe life very ironically as an idiot there, or look at that dog? Are you an observer of life, or are you a kind of political satirist? Can you be both? I don't know.
So talking about dogs, I once asked a friend a question, can you scratch behind your ear like the dog does? And everyone else found it funny. But I was serious about it because he was into yoga. Before this, you asked me about the political part of it. For a very long time, I was apolitical. But in between 1983 and 1985, I wrote a lot against Indira Gandhi. And my husband at that time was serving in the Indian government, and nobody objected to it. In that era, it was surprised. Nobody objected to it. After 20 years of writing, and I didn't know that my column was so popular till after it was discontinued, and I got many emails. That's when I knew that, people did read it. Okay. Why was it discontinued? I used to, in my mother's language, tu parikarchi tingle kiti karte. You tease him so much. Parikar never, I don't think he even read it. I don't think he was bothered what was written about him. But other people may have. Parikar passed away, and then, I don't know, I did write something consecutively, which now when I read it, it could have been against the present government, but it wasn't. It was just something that I wrote, and the column was discontinued overnight.
Oh, I see.
So, December 2016, I was told, we do not need you to write any longer. So that is how it is. After that, of course, I've changed my political opinions quite a bit. Understandably so. But in my column, it would start with Shri husband and I are not talking to each other again. I realize now that was probably what held the attention of the reader. I don't think I planned it or analyzed it, but I would write, the first sentence would be something like that, and then I would go on and write about traffic jams and stuff like that. Now, Sri Husband and Bai Goan, the two characters about whom I wrote and I interacted with, are fictitious people. Please note, everybody, because I have had people walking up to my husband and offering their sympathies, including a very recent email from someone in South Africa who said, "Dear Sri Husband, please don't let Sheela maltreat you." So that's how it is. Okay, how did I get it? Just one moment. My sister was an influence, my sister and my mother. My sister, in order to keep her child occupied, she used to give him sauce in a plate and a toothpick, so he could keep himself entertained for an hour. So she really did that. And when our gap was quite a bit, so when I was a child, if I bothered her, she would say, "Now do your maths. Count backwards from 100. So I would start with, Shambha, and carry on, and she was free to do. So I think this kind of madness runs in my family.
My sister just gave me
Yes, okay, add to that.
Yeah, on this issue of humor, I once read this book by Arthur Kessler called The Act of Creation. And one of the things that really intrigued me there was, I'm a civil engineer, so he showed these graphs, and he showed two planes intersecting. Now we know geometry. What is the intersection of two planes? Any, as usual, I turn to him, it's a line. So in fiction, he says, you take two planes of life, of thought, something happening, and where they collide or intersect, there you get that spark of humor or that spark of tension relief, something happening. Like, for example, in Mario's stories, I could sort of analyze that in two of his stories. One is when that builder, real estate man, is after someone's house, and the other one was where, again, some family members are after some old, this is very much happening in Goa, where people are hungry for property and they're ready to even kill their relatives and old grandparents and all that to grab those properties. Builders are ready to do anything, eliminate the heirs of the property. So here you have this terrible plane of lust and desire and murderous greed for property. This is one plane. And then you bring in the plane of theatre. Mario is a theatre actor. Isabel is here. You bring in theatre, you bring makeup and acting, and you bring both these planes together, and you have the resolution of that conflict in those two stories, which you end up laughing, and you're so relieved, you're so happy that the problem is solved. I was laughing at the end of the stories. He brought me to this really unhappy state, because I get very worked up when I see property being grabbed and all that. Even Zemanuel is about that. And I got really upset and worked up, and how is this going to be sorted out? And then Mario solves it, he resolves that conflict through this intersection of two planes, and I laughed away. And that's humor. Humor has come from a horror story. As Sheela says, you find things to laugh about, even the most darkest moments, dark humor.
Clifford, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
Wait 1 minute. Give it to me.
How do you write your stories? How do you do it? You've got something like that. I think all can hear me. You've got something like Cameron, which I don't know if all have read.
Yeah,
How do you get an ending like that? I mean, you completely unprepared. We are completely unprepared for that. And the story is all about, everything is going in a particular direction, and then you sock us between the eyeballs.
Absolutely.
With that ending. How do you do that?
In my own short stories, what I look for are two things. One is the beginning, which is the hook. Now, when a person picks up a novel to read, I think a person is more understanding. He will give the first 10 pages or the first 12 pages to see whether it interests him, because it's a novel of 150, 200 or more pages.
Correct.
But when a person begins to pick up a short story, they are willing to give one or 1.5 paragraph.
Absolutely.
If the story doesn't interest them in the first 1.5 paragraph, they turn to the next story. So I think that a short story requires a hook, one of which can be the title itself. And so titles, I think, matter a lot in short stories. They bring in the first element of interest and intrigue, and then the first paragraph. Can be just the first sentence, ideally. If not the first sentence, at least the first paragraph. And then because I personally am a great fan of unexpected endings, little twists at the end of a story. I just love stories that have those twists at the end. And I think that leaves me happy. And so I try to put that into my story.
Right.
Now, about endings, when I begin, I have never begun a story without knowing how or without thinking how I am going to end it. Having said that, I must say that in more than half my stories, the end has changed
Oh, I see.
while I'm writing it. But if I don't have an end in sight, even which may be subsequently changed, I think this writing meanders. And then you start putting in padding, which any reader can actually spot later on. So, in fact, my advice to people who write is always have an end in sight. You may change that end as you write, but if you don't have an end in sight, then you will meander, and your story will not actually grip. And basically, I look for a story between 3,000 and 5,000 words, never longer than 5, generally not shorter than 3. I have been trying to write those super short stories, but I haven't yet succeeded. So, yeah, that was my response to Clifford. Questions? Yeah, you can
So I
take.
have 2 questions, if I may.
Okay.
I have 2 questions, one for you, but I'm going to go one
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm curious.
But be brief with your
Yes,
questions then,
I will.
and I'll request all panelists to be brief with their answers so that we can accommodate more questions also. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my first question to all of you is that when you're writing and you want to make it interesting, one of the things which at least I have found useful is to look for fatal flaws which exist in a character and try and tease them out. So I'm curious, how do you do it for the writing work that you do, or is it important at all? If so, how do you do it? If not, then that's my question to any of you.
Absolutely. And you don't really have to work very hard for that. You don't even have to look for it much, because every one of us is completely fatally flawed. Every one of us. You just have to observe, and you'll get it. It's there. It's just lurking. Within 10 or 15 minutes of conversation, you know what are the flaws of that person. And if you are a good observer, you will first know your own flaws. Then you become a good observer of flaws. And this is not standing in judgment of those flaws. It's just accepting that he is human, you're human, and this is how we work together.
You know, apart from identifying the flaw, once you identify it, do you drop it or do you let it float?
In fact, my response was exactly taking on from where Jose said. Yes, you know that flaw and that character which you have to expose in order to bring the story. But here is where I say, when I introduced the short story, and I say sometimes the challenge can be greater than writing a novel, I was not exaggerating. Because you see, in a novel, you have adequate space
Correct.
to develop character. And you are able to show people not one-dimensionally, but multi-dimensional. Because all of us are multi-dimensional too. And that brings characters alive. The great challenge in a short story is, how do you make your character multi-dimensional in 3,000 words? And if you don't, then it looks unidimensional, and your character looks either black or white. And how do you bring about the grey? And that is the challenge in a short story. It is a challenge, but it is something that we all need to work towards if you decide to write a short story.
Too much goody-goody and too much righteousness is also a flaw. So,
If I may ask, do you think each language has its own short story tradition, and do they differ from each other? If so, how?
Now, I mean, I will say certainly yes, but I have only read short stories in 2 languages. So I mean, I only read in English and Hindi. I am not competent to read in Konkani or in any other foreign language. So I have not really read so widely, but certainly, styles, at least in these 2 languages, are different. And therefore I admire writers. In fact, José Lourenco, I was going to ask him, because he writes in Konkani and English. Do you translate your own work, or do you write them separately, and you feel that a Konkani story is a Konkani story and an English story is an English story? Or are you able to translate and get the same?
I think I have asked that question of myself. Am I a Konkani writer? Am I an English writer? And have I written the English story first and then translated? I think that was a process of learning how to write, that I would first write English stories and then translate them to Konkani, because the dialogue and the speaking is all in Konkani. The characters are from Goa. They are speaking in Konkani. So it's most befitting that it be a Konkani story. So I would, write down the points and then get down the Konkani narrative. And some of them were English stories because they were not set in a kind of village Konkani setting. So those would be English stories. So I think it depends on whether the characters are Goan characters, they speak in Konkani, then it's most appropriate that that story be in Konkani. But coming back to this flaw, I once wrote a story on Frederick. May I, Frederick? So here's Frederick's flaw. I mean, it was a flaw at that time. Now he doesn't care much about that. You still care? You're cured of it. See?
Not bound by the sea.
I was a dotor. I was a dotor to cure Frederick's flaw, I think. So Frederick would get really angry if anybody called him Rico, Fred, shortening his name, all kinds of things, shortening. He said, no, call me Frederick, he would say. And people, just to tease him, they would continue, hey, Rico this, Rico that, hey, Fred this, that, and all that kind of. How many versions were there? Fred, Rico, and CC. He's too embarrassed to say.
Good, good, again.
You tell your
Yeah.
short story on your short story.
Yeah. So I wrote a short story. Fun.
You grew up calling
Yeah. It's a nickname. Yeah.
I can't believe
Come, let's proceed.
Yeah,
because we
Yes,
there are
yes.
other questions
Yes, yes.
too, and we need
So anyway, I wrote that story where this character, resists all these efforts and asserts himself, his right to be called Frederico and all that. And eventually he triumphs when the cop who's giving him a talon reads from his license Frederico, and he says it, and he's so proud that he's been called Frederick, and that was the story. So I'm just an example of a flaw, and I presume you can take any flaw of anyone sitting around here and make a story out of it.
True.
Just to add, see, I have no problem with anyone calling